apply in your own life as well. So, here's Bonnie.
Thank you guys for being here. I know the senior projects can get to be a little tiresome at times, but it's really important to me that you guys are willing to sit through it. And I hope you take something away from it too. I would like to preface this just by giving a light warning that I will be talking about some lightly talking about some abuse and the mention of some other trauma. So take that with consideration into consideration when you're here. And if you need to get up and walk away, I understand. But feel free to come back too. Imagine a light. You are this light. Inside a car, you're driving along a pristine highway en route to some unknown destination far beyond your view. You've no idea how far you'll have to travel to get there. No clue how long the journey will be, but you are determined to see what it is that lies beyond the horizon. You wonder, what is that tantalizing glow that drives you to speed steadily onwards? And what motivates all the other cars around you to do the same? In the hopes that you'll find whatever it is you feel lacking inside, somewhere beyond your line of sight, you keep moving forward. At the beginning of your travels, you felt excited and motivated to continue onwards. But now that you have encountered potholes and storms along the way, you are considering other paths. Should I simply turn around? You ask yourself. Will I ever make it? You ponder. Maybe this road leads to nowhere at all, you find yourself considering. As the cluster of sparks you've surrounded yourself with begin to pull ahead and fall away, driven down paths towards their own enlightenment, you find yourself doubting your resolve, slowly creating your own potholes. You begin to worry you'll burn out entirely. The passing exits leading to lives you're able to understand but unable to settle into begin to leave a feeling of inadequacy deep down within your once fiery, now smoldering core. How do they do it? How are they so good at being happy? You wonder, distracted by their gleaming billboard advertisements of the perfect life, the best job, and the most loving family. You find yourself veering towards the edge of your highway in this distracted state with focus on everyone but yourself. It is time to realign. Take a deep breath. This journey, this path, this seemingly unending highway with its hazards and storms, distractions and potholes, dead ends, exits, and roundabouts is one traveled by us all. Some are easily distracted by the twinkling lights that string the many branches of this major highway. They leave, return, leave again, unsatisfied with any sort of outcome. Some crash, some burn. Some decide whatever it is they're driving towards is simply not worth the effort it takes to keep moving. Others are whisked away on a platform of their own, above us all, motorized and self-propelled towards a bliss and comfort of life unattainable by those below. Unfortunately, the truth is, this quest we find ourselves on is no fairer to its participants than a loaded die. The loose gravel on the road that causes us to skid out, the hailstorms that dent our roofs, crack our windshields, scrape our fenders, side panels, and bumpers, the floods that damage our interiors and wreck our coats of paint, all of these factors are outside of our control and oftentimes unavoidable. And yet, it often feels as if you are the only one in the path of these storms. Others beside you ride smoothly on plush tires, yet more fly above the clouds, unaffected by and unaware of the turmoil below. So, if we know that all of these uncontrollable, unpreventable, unstoppable forces will never cease to thwart us, if we know that no matter how much work we put in, others will always be moving faster than us, will always have the better phone, the better wife, the cushier job, why, how do we keep moving forward? Well, I suppose I can't tell you how you get yourself out of bed in the morning, but I do know that we, as humans, drive down this road in the pursuit of happiness, fueled by hope, curiosity, kindness, and empathy. Maybe you're yearning for the person you'll call the one. Maybe you're in the search of life's wonders, and you want to gain an understanding of our world's innumerable mysteries. Maybe you have no clue what you want, but you know you want to figure it out. Katharina Blum, an internationally acclaimed TEDx speaker, positive psychologist, and author of books on happiness and mental well-being, believes that this highly sought-after state of emotion is closer than we have grown to believe. It does not lie at the end of a long road, nor is it found in a Scrooge McDuck-style vault swimming among mounds of gold. Instead, Blum insists happiness is a skill cultivated through positive action. Her definition, when paired with those of Robert Waldinger and Davidson and Begley, explains that happiness is not in fact a destination, but a continued practice, an interconnected structure of highways, roads, and other paths, if you will. It is navigated using education, conscious introspection, and implementation of specific psychological and physiological acts which positively impact daily mood. But what does this mean when considering the goal of achieving happiness that we all know so well? What does one do when it turns out that this long road we find ourselves driving along does not, in fact, have an end? This fictional final destination that has been taught to us by elders, society, and capitalism as a whole is simply non-existent. It's no wonder the majority of people spend their entire lives unhappy and wanting more. If one is taught from an early age that they will have to spend their lives fighting an arbitrary battle, working for people they don't care to serve, making difficult choices, and sacrificing their mental health to contribute to a society that does not care if they feel satisfied as individuals or not, well, again, it's simply no wonder we're all so miserable. I, along with many, believe it is time this idea is changed. It is time to hand down a new idea to the youth of tomorrow, to teach a new mindset, one focused on personal development instead of material gain, one that highlights the joy found in the beautiful, previously viewed as mundane minutiae of everyday life. When working to enhance one's daily living experience, one must first strive to understand their personal educational style. Emotional style, excuse me. The term emotional style is explained in detail in Davidson and Begley's The Emotional Life of Your Brain. This central idea guides us in deciding which roads we shall travel down in life. Emotional style is a foundation poured by the guiding hands of one's parents when one is young. It develops and cures as you become an adult, and once you've branched out into the world, it finally settles into the highways you will begin to travel along for the rest of your life. One's emotional style is defined by the following factors: resilience, outlook, social intuition, self-awareness, sensitivity to context, and attended by psychology today that a sense of happiness and contentment develops within an individual as they age, growing steadily during childhood, often taking a dip from ages 14 to 25, building with ups and downs till around age 60 when the individual's level. Well, the answer, as with any psychological qualm, is complicated and specific to each person's individual needs and interests. But there are universal future aspirations. wish to share an example of the main form of reflection I choose to apply in my everyday practices, poetry. I'll be reading a poem titled The Wizard's Daughter. It takes inspiration from The Wizard of Oz, but with my own personalized twist. I'll break down the meaning behind each idea following the reading's conclusion. Wicked forest, thick and prickled, branches snag loose threads, smiling faces painted on crowned thickened heads. The forest of disguised plight surrounds this scared girl lone. Within herself she turns instead away from what she's known. Though winds whisper through the leaves, oh how she will fail. The flash of petals down the road tells her to prevail. Through mud and muck she trudges on with little to her name. With only hope, star-struck by matching concealed claims of love and cloaked intentions, camouflaged as simple games. She stumbles over brush and thicket out unto the range of vast poppy fields and loses conscious brain, falling into plush grass, a break from the estranged. Oh, awaken, little one, awaken and stand bare. This man of many faces no longer holds you, fair maiden of the outside world shines light upon her brow. Just as she winks, twisted blinks, dewdrops glisten and glide true. This mirror's picture, righted by her, is simply one of you, the Wizard's Daughter. The poem opens with an image that is gruff and painful. Wicked forest, thick and prickled, branches snag loose threads. This represents the constant nagging I felt within my home growing up, the way my parents treated me felt as if they were tearing pieces of my reality away. The lines reading similar faces, smiling faces painted on crowned, thickened heads symbolizes my parents' belief in the righteousness of their own actions, the way they tried to justify their treatment of me, treatment which has trained me to think poorly and critically of myself. Their words I retained, which echoed within my head for years, reminding me of my lack of worth and burdensome character, are represented by the windy whisper, oh, how she will fail. I struggled to move on from them, but I maintained the idea that there was truth in how I saw myself and not in how they saw me, and that kept me going. The flash of petals down the road refers to the beginning of the transition out of my home, and the symbolism continues with, she stumbles over brush and thicket out onto the range, representing my initial struggles with leaving the house, handling my own money, and carrying myself as an individual while facing new challenges. Finally, this stanza concludes with a reference to my drug use, which has been an on-again, off-again issue this past year as I work through my internal struggles, find motivation in life, and learn to face my issues instead of running from them. The final stanza begins with a call to action. Awaken, little one, awaken and stand bare, which is meant to highlight how I reinvented myself with a new name, new ideals, and a new sense of identity at the beginning of 2022. Choosing to strip myself of the past masks used to fade into the crowd, instead deciding to embrace the entirety of myself and be proud to show all. Once again, I reference my childhood, this time in realization that I'm no longer held in the emotional, psychological shackles I once felt weighed down by. And I find myself within a mirror, finally seeing for the first time that I am exactly the person I've always wanted to be. This poem holds deep meanings of self-reliance. It represents emotional and mental maturity, the shedding of labels stricken upon me by others' biased views, and my rebirth as a young adult woman, finally free, finally finding myself, able to live instead of simply survive. When considering how to live, I've realized many important things. Possibly the most so, at least from my view where I stand today, is remembering not to get overtly fixated on achieving short-term bliss through material possession or sacrificing of possible future opportunities. As the choices one makes for today's joy may cause detrimental losses of tomorrow. Say, for example, you find yourself making the decision to buy a new motorized scooter with a bonus you've just received from work, well, you might end up sacrificing that trip to Vegas you've been planning on for months now. This impulsive decision is just one example of the many tantalizing obstacles that an individual must choose to ignore and or grow to overcome along their journey in life. In combination with this form of mental realignment, there are also physiological factors that play a role in one's pursuit of contentment. The major contributing physical intake factors are nutrition, exercise, medication, sunlight. I sucked it out a little, huh? Oh, I really sucked.
If you hover the mouse on the
Oh, that's
lower
not what I
left
want.
screen, you'll be able to get back. There you go.
There we go. Okay. We're gonna try. Sometimes you swerve off the road a little. You know, you get back on there. In combination with this form of mental realignment, there are also physiological factors that play a role in one's pursuit of contentment. The major contributing physical intake factors are nutrition, exercise, medication, sunlight, and exposure to nature. While the former three examples are understood by most to have a great impact on one's mental as well as physical well-being, the latter two are less so employed. While nutrition, exercise, and medication play a large role in maintaining the stability of one's relationship between one's gut microbiome, neuroelectrical activity, and balance of neurochemical deficits in depressed persons, the use of increased sunlight and exposure to nature, in combination with necessary psychotherapy, is imperative to the reestablishment of this baseline of stability. Say it with me now. One cannot repave the road without first filling the pothole. One of the ways I began to fill my holes, emotional, spiritual, psychological, is by viewing them as opportunities for growth and not the simple lack of space I used to see them as. It is the view of many, such as the author of the highly acclaimed Blink, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking, Malcolm Gladwell, that in order to best understand life's meaning, to taste and appreciate all the complexities within this rich life pie, one must focus on education. Specifically, one must learn to name these obstacles, these potholes, for what they are. Divots in the road that, although often caused by outside forces, say the loss of a loved one, missing out on an important event, or watching your ice cream slide off the cone as you try to shake those extra loose sprinkles out the window so they don't land in the crooks of your car. Well, these impacts on happiness, on our motivation to keep going, that affect each and every one of us, are actually controllable in a way. Or at least, the way you react to them is controllable. How you view the world, how you respond to input, to negativity, to the different trials and tribulations life will undoubtedly hurl your way, that is the key to happiness. Furthermore, it is important to learn how to use the equipment required to repave those potholes that fall like sprinkles onto our roads. It is undeniable that you will require rest along the way to your destination. It is normal and expected to find yourself in a ditch every now and then. In fact, your life may turn out to contain way more mountains than molehills, far more uphill battles, with few carefree coasts down the other side. And in this case, it is ever more crucial to remind yourself that every task you accomplish today is just that, an accomplishment. Every time you get out of bed, every time you leave the house to go to work or school or simply for a walk, you are moving forward. Even on the days or weeks or months when life feels simply unbearable, when you can't get out of bed and you let the dishes pile up and you see the cobwebs on the ceiling, but you just can't seem to be able to address them, those days are just as important, just as productive in the long-term quest for fulfillment. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, now she's lost me. I was with her on the happiness thing, but now she's talking about the importance of sad days too? I just don't see the point. Well, the idea of maintaining one's highway, is simply not possible without wading through the muck that caused the cracks to form in the first place. And really, sadness itself should not be viewed as a failure or happiness or lack thereof. Instead, it should be understood as the time of further necessary reflection that it represents. If one is distraught over a situation, loss of relationship, or other vexing factor, one's shift in general mood should serve as an indication that additional introspection is needed. Comparatively, if one finds themselves feeling down with no sense of or understanding of the reasoning behind it, this mindful practice is even more so important, as the recognition of reasoning behind such a lowly state will lead to increased happiness and fulfillment later on. If you don't point out the crack, name it, and accept it for what it is, how will you ever begin to fill it? The conscious practice of allowing oneself recuperation and increased self-kindness during bouts of depression, grief, or other unsettling emotions is crucial in the act of repairing one's road. This skill is just one example of the many techniques necessary in life used to maintain emotional regulation and psychological alignment along the course of one's journey. It is just one tool needed to fix these potholes. And along with giving yourself space and rest, and maybe a chocolate chip cookie here and there, you should also remind yourself that this too shall pass, a statement reiterated to me by a kind man, a Buddhist monk, Manju Frackleton, I called friend and teacher during my early years on the road. After the reparation of a pothole, filling of a crack, or removal of an obstacle lying in your path, it is important to remember what caused those often forceful disruptions of your movement, and also to remember how you reacted to them. Furthermore, it is important to remember how you interacted with the other cars around you, sharing the road, in those times when you had to change lanes or get out and fix the infrastructure below. Malcolm Gladwell insists that a transition away from relying on unconscious reactions to emotional stimuli, these interruptions to our everyday travel, towards making conscious, logical, empathetic decisions within social interactions is necessary to improve mental stability and deepen the resolve from which our abilities to communicate are drawn. For example, let's say you get into an argument over something with a close friend. They have broken your trust and hurt your feelings in the act. Your gut reaction may be to lash out at them, to tell them you hate them and never want to see their face again. Maybe this is how you feel in the moment, but this statement may not necessarily be the truth, and equally more so important, may not be justified. These immediate emotional reactions, the ones that you feel you cannot control, those mad, sad, angry, disgusted, hurt reactions that just boil up and out of you, they come from the unconscious mind. If, for example, you were raised by an adult who constantly broke your trust, even if only in minute ways, it is understandable that you would be extremely upset with the way your friend has now done the same. The emotion that arises from this confrontation with your friend, the way that the break in trust triggers your memory of past discontent, is valid, acceptable, and reasonable. The issue with this reaction begins when you inflict this emotional response upon your friend, who unwittingly opened this can of worms when they had no idea it existed in the first place. Now, you might not have realized this trauma existed either, and that too is understandable. But if one does not question their emotional, instinctual replies in times of heated passion, one is choosing to ignore the fact that they could be wrong in the way they are handling the situation. In other words, if you feel a strong reaction to something being said to you, that emotional reaction itself is a sign that you must step away from the conversation to name this reaction, figure out where it's coming from, and try to reframe what it is you want to say in response. If you do not practice this skill, you will find yourself lashing out at others in unjustifiably defensive ways. This instinct to defend oneself comes from a place of unresolved trauma, feelings of vulnerability, and worries of being hurt again in the future. Because we as humans have the natural fight or flight instinct that can be triggered in situations when it is not necessary. We must work to combat this reaction if we wish to continue meaningful, emotional, respectful relationships with others. The intentional rewiring of one's brain, the deliberate choice to alter which electrical pathways are most frequently traveled in times of heated emotional arousal, is paramount in the quest to experience any sort of deep emotional connection with another. This choice shows that you, as an emotionally mature, caring individual, have the space in your mind and heart for differing viewpoints, questions relating to misunderstandings, and honesty when mistakes are made, all of which are examples of communication skills that require vulnerability, a state which does not occur when one feels threatened by another. In sum, when you feel a response boil out of your gut, through your throat, into your mouth, wanting to break free and rain terror down upon those within earshot, that is a sign that you probably have a few issues to work out on your own. And if you choose not to do so, you end up sacrificing the opportunity for vulnerability with others. And let me tell you from personal experience, you do not want to sacrifice that opportunity. On the handout I've given you, all of you, there are examples of social skills that I've worked to develop over the years that I employ on a daily basis to improve my ease of communication, interpersonal connection, feelings of stability, and overall confidence within social settings. If you have further interest in these examples following the conclusion of my speech, I implore you to reference this handy-dandy handout for in-depth analyses and explanations with references of said social skills. I would like to highlight one of these very crucial skills here today that I've learned over the years through poor relationships being stolen from, manipulated, abused, and raped. No matter which kind of relationship one is looking to deepen with another, platonic, familial, romantic, it is paramount to one's own mental, physical, and emotional health to remain true to one's personal values. These may present as traditions, ongoing relationships with family or friends, or simple maintenance schedules for personal hygiene. When considering the use of compromises and flexibility within interpersonal relationships, it is important to remind yourself that if this value is dear to you, if it is greatly impactful, you should not let someone dissuade you from its practice. Although this advice may sound quite obvious or easily employed, I have found that in everyday occurrences, it is a hard boundary to uphold when facing those who oppose it. But the prevalence of such opposition is itself the reasoning behind the significance of this skill. There are many people who walk this earth searching only for those whose allegiance will benefit their own efforts, and as such, act as leeches in the majority of relationships. Perseverance in the act of maintaining one's own personal values while faced with these ugly social leeches is truly the only way to sustain self-preservation while retaining one's sense of individuality. It should be mentioned, however, that the practice of exploring topics and ventures outside of one's comfort zone is exceptionally healthy and encouraged, as previously stated, though only so when such exploration is both itself beneficial, or seemingly beneficial if the true outcome is unknown, to the individual taking part, and does not directly conflict with one's previously established boundaries. Although this rule is, again, flexible, and should be used in a way that is most beneficial to the individual applying it. The practice of reflecting on how another's emotions affect oneself should not only take place when considering the maintenance of personal boundaries and values. It is also an important exercise to be used when considering how others' emotions affect one's own. Much research has recently come to light on the topic of unintentional emotional reflection of one's surrounding community. As highlighted in Dr. Sherry Carter's study, Emotions Are Contagious, Choose Your Company Wisely, it is now well understood that humans have a natural tendency to unconsciously imitate the physical emotional responses exhibited by social peers. Due to this natural, unavoidable tactic of social engineering and evolutionary development, one must make a conscious effort to consider whether such reflections are positively or negatively impactful on one's own mental health. One common example of this emotional imitation can be found in its own home. As children develop their own internal thoughts and feelings, these ideas will often be perceived by the child as individual and separate from their parents. However, these unconsciously biased thoughts are fundamentally absorbed through the lens of their parents' eyes, and are therefore simply the reactions to or interpretations of what the child hears from those authority figures. This specific form of emotional or psychological imitation by children of their guardians is categorized as mental priming, a subject I personally have quite a bit of experience with. And although not fundamentally negative in its impact on children as they age, this priming can become negative if the authority figure is mentally ill or abusive in their guidance. This often unintentional, generational abuse can only be combated by the implementation of clinical behavioral therapy, CBT, which works to restructure one's immediate reactions to uncontrolled stimuli. CBT, when combined with positive coping strategies for difficult situations, stress, or other overstimulating emotional states, is an effective way to remold these developing young minds damaged by poor parenting skills. Ideally, however, this damage would be prevented instead of remedied. Through continual education on various successful parenting strategies, such as employing empathy, allowing for healthy boundaries, exhibiting vulnerability, and keeping an open line of communication between parent and child, the negative mental priming found prevalent in today's youth can be greatly lessened. The prevention of abuse or otherwise unhealthy parent-child relationships is yet another example of where education, as well as creativity, is key to success. As one considers the many complex, intricate paths that weave together to form the long, arduous highway that is life and finding happiness in living, it is important to remember these 3 key points. Remain curious. There is so much to learn. Be kind and considerate of yourself and others, and when able, extend your hand to those in need. Strive for the best version of yourself and work to maintain a positive mindset. Above anything else, keep moving forward. There is no trick to life. There is no jackpot, second take, or helpful handbook, but as one wild rocker once said, we've got each other, and that's a lot for love. Let's give it a shot. Thank you. So, real quick, I know I didn't really touch much on like hours or specificities of my project. I have about 400 hours now, and it's, as many of you know, many possibly don't know, this is my second senior year here. It took me a while to figure out what I wanted to research and what was really important to me, and I think taking that extra time has helped me grow in a way that I would not have been able to if I had graduated last year. And I'm really proud of myself for putting in that extra work and taking the time I needed to figure myself out. I'll open the floor to any questions that anybody has now. Ms. Luke?
It seems like there would be a lot of research out there on happiness and how to find happiness. Were there a lot of universal concepts that you...
Relationships you build with other people, taking care of yourself physically improves your mental state. So there are definitely universally applicable practices. I have also in the handout, the first section is activities that I took part in this year, that I used for mental rehabilitation and rest and relaxation. And I think those things can be applied in many people's lives, or can be changed slightly to fit their own needs, but the concepts remain the same for everyone, I think. So it's a little bit of both. It really is, because there are universally applicable practices, but every person is going to take that practice and mold it into something that works for them. And that's really the important part, I think, about, you know, this research I've done here. Yeah, Jacob.
Did you do like any research on what someone who like is already sort of generally happy can do to like help people around them, or is that like outside of the?
You know, that wasn't something I specifically looked into, but I'll repeat the question. It was, what can someone who's generally happy do to help people around them? Is there something someone can do to help people around them? And I think there definitely is. I believe that, again, employing vulnerability, giving people a space to share their feelings with you is really important. And I think that if you feel really comfortable with yourself and really confident in your life, then, you know, it's time to extend your hand to those who are struggling. And ways you can do that are, there are so many ways to volunteer, and other ways you can contribute to your community could be unplanned acts of kindness, like, I don't know, paying for someone's expired parking meter you see on the street, or helping an elderly person cross the street, or, I don't know, telling them how to use Facebook. Practice that here, I think. Not with you guys, I'm gonna say that, but like, you know, at Oneida Heights. Really, it just comes down to sharing your own story so that others can feel comfortable to share theirs with you. That's something that has taken me a long time to figure out the importance of, and in some instances, it's not the right time to share your story. In some instances, you know, if you only do that, you might come off as self-centered or something, but it's a big part of opening the door for others to feel safe with you.
What was a method that you used throughout this project that you found really helped you throughout this project?
So yes, what was a method I used throughout this project that was very helpful, and I think I will ask you to maybe clarify what you mean by that.
I guess, is there like a specific method that you use for like this specific project in your project process, or something that like really helped you along in the project?
Okay, so like an organizational method, or like a way of continuing my motivation, with anything like that?
Dealer's choice.
Okay, all right, dealer's choice. Partially giving my own insight, but also just, you know, making them feel like they're wanted, because I think everyone needs to feel that way. And as far as organization goes, as we all do, I really use my computer quite a lot, and my logs are have been really important to me, and really a big part of keeping my thoughts organized. Oftentimes, it can get overwhelming when you think about the big picture of a project, especially a senior project, and I needed to break that down for myself, and that really helped me. Like, you know, breaking it down into what am I focusing on today, or this week, or this month, that will keep me moving forward. What can I do? Anything, what can I do? Can I write a poem? Can I paint a painting or draw or journal? You know, those things might not necessarily be the research aspect of the project, which I honestly struggled with quite a bit, but they are applying what I've learned, and that too is really important, at least in my specific project here. So I think, you know, thinking outside of the box, what can you do? Anything, literally anything. What can you do to keep moving forward? Because I find myself, you know, if I fall behind in something, it can seem like an unsurmountable task to dig myself out of that hole. If the dishes pile up and they're all over the counter and it's smelly and gross, I ignore them for months. Like, I just can't deal with it. But, you know, if I clean my dishes every time I get home from work, even if I let them sit overnight, but I clean them when I get home, when I'm still in that, like, working mode, that helps me, you know, to just push through, and then I can relax and give myself space to unwind too. So, yes.
So when those dishes pile up, how do you get it cleaned up?
When the dishes pile up, it can take a while for me to see the relevance in handling them. Oftentimes, I think it's easier to just push them aside and, you know, focus on whatever it is I have to deal with at school or work or in my personal life. But I've found that taking time to rest. If I'm working constantly on school, I have a job. I'm at school every day. Both of those things, you know, combined are really challenging, as well as, you know, dealing with PTSD and anxiety and, you know, the overstimulation that comes with interaction that I have on a daily basis because, you know, I am autistic, so I have to mask a lot of the time, and that can be really strenuous and taxing. Or at least I feel more comfortable masking. It feels, you know, I don't have to. I guess nobody really has to, but it can be easier to not have to explain yourself constantly. So that all can get really hard to handle, and the idea of taking on one more task that you could just put to the side, it doesn't happen. So I find that, you know, giving myself, I don't know, like going to High Cliff and spending a day in the woods hammocking, reading a book and listening to music, and, you know, I bring some snacks and a water bottle and a blanket and I just chill for 6 hours or so, then I feel good, I feel able, I feel like it's not an unsurmountable task to clean those dishes when I get home. And I think a lot of the time people don't think about, you know, I am overworked, I need a break, when they still have things that need to get done. Because we see those things and we're like, well, if I take a break, you know, I'm not being productive. And if I'm not being productive, what good am I? And that's at least something I really struggle with is, you know, connecting my self-worth to my productivity level. And so it's really important to remind yourself that you are not your productivity, you know? You are a wonderful, beautiful, amazing person no matter what you do with your day. Further questions?
What advice do you have for us about finding value in our reflection and logs?
So, what advice do I have about finding value in reflection in our logs?
You said they were very important to you
Yeah.
in this project.
They were very important to me because, I don't know, like, I think, okay, so the way that I learn is by just memorizing things blindly and accepting them as fact or whatever. I need to understand the reasoning behind it. I need to break it down. If I'm working with a logarithmic rule and the teacher tells me this is the rule, this is how it works, I don't want to I can't just accept it, because I want to understand, why. What makes it happen? What makes these two things function together? How do I break it down and I build upon my past experience to, figure it out? And that, in and of itself, helps me memorize the rule for later use. And I think that kind of aspect, that way of thinking is important for any sort of issue you're working through, or even just taking notes. Like if you take the notes and then you put your book away and you're done, you don't really internalize that information. At least I don't. I have to reread them then later, but if I take the time to write down maybe some questions I have, or think about how does this information apply to my personal life, then that helps me, keep it in my mind. It keeps it moving, and that can also stem other, products and ways of moving forward with your project in the future. So I think for me the value comes in the analyzation itself. And maybe that's not something everyone wants to take the time to do every day. And I understand that. I don't write an in-depth analysis of every single log. Sometimes I just put blah, hated it, and I move on. And that's gonna happen too, 100%. And so it's also important to remind yourself, that you're not your productivity. And if you have a bad day and you just want to get it done and move on, that's cool. But maybe write down, I hated this, I'm not feeling it today, I want to move on. And that too is reflection, And of course, giving yourself the time to reflect at the end is also important.
Advice for future seniors?
Advice for future seniors. If within the first week of your project you find yourself getting bored with your topic, stop it immediately. Choose something else. Because if you keep pushing forward, you're just going to get more and more bored. It's not going to be interesting. I first started my senior project with the idea of pursuing art therapy, the research behind art therapy, and what's important about it, how do you practice it, what's the psychology of it. And I found that I really wasn't interested in all of those things. What I was interested in was practicing it myself. And that was what led me to thinking about, what does make me happy? And what do I want to do with my life? And then I thought about it a little bit more broadly, maybe I just need to pursue that as my topic. Figuring out that. Because I just couldn't answer that question for myself. And so I decided to make that question, what do I want to do, what do I want to study, the project itself. And that, thinking outside of the box. If you like a topic, if you really are interested in a topic, but you find yourself oh, it's not really what I thought it was going to be, try to rephrase it, Yeah.
So I have two questions. So the first one isn't necessarily about happiness, but I'm kind of just wondering if you researched this. Did you research, so you talked about in your presentation, like your parents and your childhood, and you also talked about the mental priming. Did you do any research on the cycle of abuse, and did you do any research on the ACEs, if you know what the ACEs is?
Yeah, both for sure. A lot of my personal therapy sessions are based around, figuring out how I can move on from a childhood where I constantly felt confused and hurt and didn't have, my parents wouldn't really thoroughly enough explain their rules, and that is something that I really struggled with. They wouldn't explain to an extent that I could understand. And also, growing up with autism, I couldn't process that my actions had an effect on other people. I just, developmentally, it was not a thing for me. I was, in my own head constantly, and everything I did was for me, and how could it possibly affect you? I'm not doing it to you. But, so ramble over. I have thought a lot about the cycle of abuse, and that was why I thought it was really important to put in my speech the idea of reconsidering your emotional reactions to something. That, I believe, is crucial in stopping the cycle of abuse, and that is something that has been reiterated to me by my psychiatrist or therapist and through research as well. That, when I broke a rule, even if it was something little, like if I didn't do the dishes and I, got yelled at, I just, it's not because I was being malicious. It was not because I'm like, oh, I don't care what they say, I'm gonna play games. It was usually because I forgot, because I have ADHD and I just forgot. and so I think, the parental anger can often come from a place of, feeling overwhelmed or stressed with their life and, God, this kid does nothing all day and they can't even do the dishes once. Well, you need to think about, using empathy for your child who maybe doesn't, understand that. And explain, too, without being manipulative, explain, why what the child did has affected you. Don't say you make me feel this way and I'm crying at night because of you or whatever, but just say, hey, when I ask you to do something and you don't do it, I get a little upset because I have so much to do every day and I just asked you to do one thing. And maybe the kid will be like, well, I have so much going on in school too, and of course we are all complicated individuals, but deciding to, again, walk away from a situation that is emotionally charged is really important. As the parent in a parent-child relationship, you are the 30, 40, 50-year-old person. The child does not understand everything that you understand from living, and so you should not be expecting them to respond in a positive way if you lash out at them. It's just not going to happen. If you are yelling at your kid and punishing them and, doing all of these negative things, much like a dog, they're not going to respond positively. I mean, we're not, of course, more complicated than dogs, but positive reinforcement works so much better, and giving explanations and reasoning works so much better than being negative. And oftentimes, I think you'll find that your initial emotional reaction is very, very different than how you feel an hour later, a day later, when you've had time to think about it and realize, where the other person is coming from and what you really want to get across that is very, very different from what you might have wanted to say at that moment. So that is important for breaking the cycle of abuse. And additionally, working through, what causes you to get so emotional in those circumstances. For instance, because I was raised in a home of emotional manipulation, I have struggled with recognizing manipulation in my everyday life with partners, romantic partners, and with anybody, really. So practicing, clinical behavioral therapy and CBT, has been really, really helpful because, the therapist kind of walks you through, what did you think? What was your reaction? Name it. How did it make you physically feel? And then, what did they actually say? That is really important because our brains will naturally want to twist words around to fit how we are made feel by those words. But you have to recognize that what they actually said may be very different. And so, maybe in a sense, I too have overreacted to some things that have happened, and sure, it happens, but at the same time, recognizing those reactions and then working to change them or improve them in the future is much more important, than stopping them from happening, period, because we're all bound to make mistakes, and working on those mistakes is the important part.
Can you talk a little more, like the clinical behavioral therapy? I know you just talked about it a little bit, but can you kind of elaborate on that more?
Like, how does it work?
Yeah, how does it work?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you do it?
So, let's say okay, so usually it is used when someone is being consistently triggered in social interactions by things that are not themselves negative, like maybe someone tells me I'll use a specific example, like when someone gets mad and shows their anger towards me, but I know that I didn't do anything wrong to earn that anger. When someone, is just struggling with controlling their stress, that causes me to get into a state of panic, of stress, of fear, because I've been yelled at and, other things all my life. And so it's important for me to consider, am I safe? Is this person actually angry with me, or are they just angry in general and directing it at me? And then, how does it make me feel physically? And what can I do to process those physical feelings and calm myself down? So, for example, taking deep breaths is really important for me. Walking away from a situation, focusing on something that is mindless, like drawing can be mindless for me, or playing Minecraft on my Switch, or just something that takes your mind away from the topic, but after you've recognized what the issue is. So just taking your mind away from the topic by doing something else is not going to solve the problem. You have to also recognize what happened, calm yourself down, and then transition into something positive. And through that practice, you will find yourself becoming more in control of your emotions and better able to handle what life throws at you. Because you can remind yourself, I'm safe, they're not angry with me, and remind yourself, I didn't do anything wrong. It's okay, they're just blowing off steam, and they shouldn't, be directing that at me, but I can't control them. And so that's kind of an example. It's working to retrain how you react to stimuli in life. That is the whole purpose of CBT, is to retrain how your brain automatically functions and gives you those, you know, sweats and shakes and rapid heart rate, you know, those things that are traumatic triggers, you have to work through them if you want to be a successful person working with other people who don't care to work through their issues. Because there are so many of those people in the world and you can't control